Okay, I'm giving this new format a try instead of typing these up. I'm kind of just going to meander through this subject a bit, so bear with me as I get used to this format. Okay, this one will cover Uber and what matters to the people protesting and the companies involved or targeted by these protests. Some of you may have heard of the protests that occurred in certain airports around America after Donald Trump's executive order dealing with immigration. I will not delve into the policy of the executive order here and leave that to people who know better about these things, but will focus on Uber being boycotted for providing the service they said they would be responsible to provide, which probably involved taking some protesters to the location, but that is unjustly profiting from a terrible situation. So the protests were ostensibly about immigrants being affected, but if you protest an airport, you're probably going to be affecting the movement of a lot of immigrants. You protest a business like Uber, and you're probably going to be affecting a lot of drivers that are immigrants. So, should Uber have gone the way of Lyft and sent out a virtue signaling email instead of having its CEO step down from his position on this business advisory board for Donald Trump? I don't think so, because I really think this is starting to matter less and less by the day. And I think the protesters know it as well. While on a flight from New York to Nairobi, I watched Now You See Me Part 2. I did not expect much from the film, but was rather entertained by watching the evident pivot to Asia that Hollywood has been making. Local US box office revenue has been stagnant or dropping. Whether the reason is due to peak moviegoers, an increase in other forms of consumption, such as streaming services like Netflix, or overly preachy storylines from increasingly out-of-touch creatives that are alienating locals, it's clear that the change is happening. The majority of the movie was set in Macau, the Vegas of China, and I spent a lot of time thinking of the marketing and business calculations behind it. What decisions were made to see what would translate culturally or how much people on the other end would care. This change of focus is not limited to the entertainment industry. Multinational companies such as Uber are not as directly affected by local boycotts and protests. They are now forced to weigh the sensibilities of a vast number of people across different cultures, which, despite what some people might tell you, are not all the same. This is doubly important to keep in mind with a ride-sharing service such as Uber, where me, you, and the regular riders are actually seeds, whereas the drivers are the farmers, and Uber would be the equivalent of a supermarket. I know it's not the best analogy, but just like the protestations at the airport and the boycotts of Uber, it doesn't really matter in the grander scheme of things. Taxis and public transport have been an issue in Nairobi for decades. Buses have a habit of staying at the first station until they're completely full before departing, whereas taxis have a regional system where, for example, if you take a taxi from your home to the airport, the driver has to return back to that home region before he can get another fare, unless one of his personal customers calls him. This leads to many problems, the worst being the time issue, where you would call a cab, they would tell you they were 10 minutes away, when in actuality they were maybe an hour across town. After using Uber for the first time to call a cab for my dad, my mom was marveling about just the basic conveniences that many in the first world, actually not even just the first world, but first world major cities take for granted. For example, seeing where the car is on the map, it coming in 4 minutes after she called versus the 10 minutes to an hour that I mentioned before, having the price listed, having the face of the driver, an email, contacts, etc. They're just basic amenities that many of these actual outright ingrates were protesting. That's the first world protest type of thing. Well, thanks for listening. I'm going to call it a rant there. Well, it wasn't necessarily a rant. I'm just working out through this semi-scripted piece. I'll try to get better at these and upload more of them, and maybe some will be more genuinely rantish. But like and subscribe if you want more like this, and feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks.